Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah. Good afternoon,
Okay.
and
Well,
welcome to TORAPS. That is the acronym for the Organization for Regulatory Affairs Professionals, second quarterly webinar series. Topic: Pharmacovigilance, Global Best Practices. So I would like, before we start, I would like to introduce TORAP. TORAP is an acronym for the Organization of Regulatory Affairs Professionals. This is an organization of regulatory affairs professionals whose work is devoted to ensuring compliance with regulations to assure safety, efficacy, and wholesomeness of medicines, cosmetics products, packaged food products, and other regulated products. Membership is open to independent consultants and company employees who are involved in regulatory compliance of regulated products. Is equally open to academics with interest in regulatory affairs, and the main objective of the group is to add to improving the environment of regulation in Nigeria. It equally aims to improve knowledge of practitioners and provide a forum for knowledge sharing best practices, which is one of the things we hope to achieve today, and resolve grievances. So for today, we'll be hearing from three seasoned regulatory affairs professionals covering three beautiful topics. First, we'll hear from Dr. Jerusha, who will be sharing pharmacovigilance, the East African experience. Dr. Jerusha is passionate about achieving excellence in pharmaceutical compliance. She's a pharmacist, as she holds a Bachelor of Pharmacy from the University of Nairobi, Kenya. She equally holds a postgraduate diploma in regulatory affairs and pharmacovigilance, and an advanced postgraduate diploma in clinical research and quality assurance from James Lynn Institute. Secondly, we will hear from Mrs. Mary Banwo Ige on the topic pharmacovigilance, the Nigerian experience. Mrs. Banwo has over 11 years experience working across functions of sales, pharmacovigilance, quality assurance across the sub-Saharan region. Currently, she is the qualified person for pharmacovigilance at Roche Pharma, Nigeria. She holds a Bachelor of Pharmacy. Then lastly, we'll hear from John Christopher Delume on the topic focusing regulatory strengthening on activities critical for the effectiveness of pharmacovigilance systems in sub-Saharan Africa. Jean Christopher has a wide working experience across the region and globally. He has worked in Paris, Tokyo, and China and Singapore. Currently, he is a member of the committee of the International Society for Pharmacovigilance. He's the vice chair of International Pharmacovigilance Group of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. and he is involved in academic teaching at the university in Singapore, Peking University, and he equally teaches at APEC. So to moderate today's event is no other person than the foremost director of Pharmacovigilance Directorate with the Nigerian National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control. This person started the directorate. She has been at the forefront of pharmacovigilance activities in Nigeria. I am talking about no other person than pharmacist Adeline Osakwe. Adeline Osakwe, please, you can have the floor to commence the program.
I think pharmacist Osakwe is having some technical glitches. So we'll go ahead anyway. And our first speaker will be Dr. Jerusha Kamau from Kenya. And we'd love to hear your experience with pharmacovigilance in Kenya. So we're going to enable you to share the screen, and we'll take over from there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jerusha Kamau, as our host has said, and pharmacovigilance is my pet subject. I love it because it's in the midst of the most important stakeholder in the healthcare sector, and that is the patient. I work at Jeffrex. Jeffrex Consultants is a pharmaceutical consultancy firm domiciled in Kenya. And we focus on the regulatory compliance for medical products and technologies. And I work with a team of experts, which allows us to leverage on diverse skills, competencies, and knowledge, hence offering an end-to-end regulatory solutions, what many will call a one-stop shop for regulatory compliance. And besides that, I'm also a very strong champion for the adoption of track and trace solutions. And this is basically very important towards advancing products and patient safety through product visibility, which is really key in ending patient safety. I'll go straight to the subject matter because I was not invited here to talk about Jeffrex. And so we are going to look at the pharmacovigilance from the East African perspective. Pharmacovigilance from the East African perspective. East African community includes, East African community includes Tanzania, Uganda. I think sorry about that. Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi, and South Sudan. And pharmacovigilance practice is actually an emerging field in East Africa, with most states having promulgated their guidelines within the last 5 years or so. We have Uganda that promulgated their guidelines in 2018. Kenya promulgated their guidelines in 2019. And Tanzania, their guidelines are still in draft. But although it's considered a strongly regulated country, and we have Rwanda, Rwanda has adopted the East African Harmonized Guidelines. Burundi and South Sudan, being part of the East African community, are also part of the East African pharmacovigilance harmonized guidelines. We are going to look at various subjects in this presentation. We'll look at the overview, successes, the regulations in place. We're also going to look at the fact sheets of what's happening. We will also look at the challenges, and we will conclude and give some recommendations. In overview, an effective pharmacovigilance system should really identify the necessary passive and active PV activities. It should be able to effectively communicate all safety information to the relevant stakeholders in a timely manner, and it should also be able to enhance collaboration among all the stakeholders in order to effectively ensure patient safety. It should also be able to incorporate PV activities at all patient and product touch points. And by these touch points, we are looking at the clinical trials, patient support programs, importations, manufacturing, and the distribution. We will look at the various regulation guidelines that are effective in East Africa. The most recent guideline is the harmonized guidelines for the pharmacovigilance for the East African community. And this is very important because it helps even the countries that don't have the capacity to have the pharmacovigilance in their health authorities to come up with pharmacovigilance activities that will ensure the patient's safety. Kenya has also promulgated its guidelines since 2019, and it heavily drew its guidelines from the harmonized guidelines for pharmacovigilance for the East African. Uganda is also part of the East African community, but interestingly, it has also been revising their guidelines, the most recent being one that they revised in 2020. So we can see there is a lot of activities around pharmacovigilance in the East African community. Tanzania, as I said, they are also very active, although their guidelines are still in draft. Rwanda has adopted the East African guidelines, so we can effectively say they have pharmacovigilance systems in place. Burundi and South Sudan, the same. So East African is really primed to ensure that the patients are safe. As you can see, all the health authorities have pharmacovigilance systems in place. Looking at the fact sheets, here I just tried to summarize how the East African PV level ground looks like. So Kenya, we have the post-market guidelines, we have the clinical trials, and so it is considered a strongly regulated state. It also requires a local QPPV to be in place, and that QPPV should be resident. This just shows that it is very serious about the pharmacovigilance activities and compliance. Uganda is the same. They have post-market guidelines, clinical trials guidelines, and they are considered to be strongly regulated. They have a requirement for the local QPPV, and that QPPV should be a resident. Tanzania, we have post-market guidelines, clinical trials guidelines. It's also strongly regulated, though, as we have said, the guidelines are still in draft. Rwanda, the same. Burundi and South Sudan, they are part of the East African community, and so they are going by the East African harmonized pharmacovigilance guidelines. I tried to compare that with the rest of the countries in the sub-Saharan Africa, and I looked at Zimbabwe, whereby we have the post-market guidelines, the clinical trial guidelines, and it is strongly regulated, although they do not require a local QPPV. Mauritius, the same. Cape Verde, we don't have clinical trials guidelines, which is really a gap because sometimes we get quite a number of adverse events coming from the clinical trials. Mozambique, again, we don't have the clinical trials guidelines. Interestingly, Malawi, we have the clinical trials guidelines, but not the post-market guidelines. So if you compare the East African and the rest of the Sub-Saharan Africa, you can see that we really have very many systems in place, and we are really the trendsetters as far as pharmacovigilance activities are concerned. We look at the emerging issues. The emerging issues we have in place is, for example, the medical device vigilance. In the region, the medical device, even the registration and the regulation has not been very robust. But interestingly, in the last 2 years, we have seen most states starting to register the product, whereas before we were just like doing a notification or what we would call a listing. But the last 2 years, we have seen many countries starting to do the registration. And basically, this I found it very key, especially when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, because I was not imagining if we are not regulating the medical devices, the PPEs, what would have happened? We have seen a great impact on the safety of the healthcare workers. And this actually has been eased by the fact that the medical devices are registered, and so the quality is assured. However, there is need for serious capacity building for all stakeholders, considering that this is a newly emerging issue, and we have a long way to go in terms of regulating the medical devices and reporting the adverse events and all the incidents associated with medical devices. When we look at the COVID-19 perspective, as I said, the quality of the PPEs come into sharp focus because of the healthcare, the safety of the healthcare workers. Of course, I am sure across the globe, we have always seen very serious numbers of the healthcare workers who are either infected or who are actually dying. Here in East Africa, the numbers are not good at all. And so this comes at a time that we need to give serious consideration about how we regulate the PPEs. Before that, disinfectants and antiseptics actually were not strongly regulated, but now all the states are strongly regulating the antiseptics and the disinfectants in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the same case, we have seen the arrival of the COVID-19 vaccine. Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, already we have started the vaccination programs, of course, starting from the most vulnerable groups. And what is in the mouth of every pharmacist, every pharmacovigilance pharmacist is how is this vaccine? Of course, we know it has gone through the clinical trials. They have been given marketing authorization by the health authorities, but being a new product, people have many questions in their minds. And so we are looking forward to being able to receive all the safety issues as far as these vaccines are concerned, so that we can ensure the benefit risk profile of the product continues to be to the benefit of the patient. We have also seen a case of off-label use, and of course, what comes to mind here is the azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine. And again, we are looking at how is this going to impact, especially on the patients who are already using other products. We want to look at that and see how it's going to emerge. As we said, these are emerging issues in pharmacovigilance. Other emerging issues, especially the neglected areas, we have the use of complementary health products, the herbal products, and the cosmetics. These are all products that are very helpful, but they could also cause serious harm. And most of the times, we find that people hardly report about any adverse events concerning these products, because one, they are not usually used in a medical setup most of the times. Most of the times, they are actually self-medicated. And so we find that the users are not coming out to say what kind of events are they experiencing. And so we are looking at, even in the East African community, we are looking at looping in the complementary health products Like in Kenya, we are already at advanced stages of having the cosmetics guidelines and the herbal products so that all these products can be looked into pharmacovigilance. One area that is of great concern is the veterinary pharmaceuticals, that is dewormers and antibiotics, and also the pesticides and herbicides. We know that these products will finally get into the human body through the products we eat, food, either plant products or the meat products. And so we are looking at who is looking at the effects that these products are having on the patients and in the public. How well are these products regulated? The products may be regulated, but very few people will be able to connect that a veterinary product or some meat I took could be causing to me this reaction because they took the meat and the animal is the one which has taken the product. So this is an emerging area which is also neglected, which we didn't need to look at. Pharmacovigilance, as we have always said, is a team sport whereby all the stakeholders should join their efforts, should collaborate to ensure that the patient and the public is safe. And so with the different stakeholders, we have the government. The government, we are looking at the government giving us the political goodwill to pass the relevant laws that support drug safety activities. This is very important as we know in Africa, most of the battles are won politically first before we come to policy. So we are looking at how do we get goodwill from the government? And from that, we shall be able to get the budget allocations because as much as we want to do these activities, if the health authorities, if the MOH does not have the budget, then it becomes impossible to implement any guidelines. The regulatory authorities are very key as stakeholder in the whole of these pharmacovigilance activities because they are the gatekeepers really to ensure the public is safe. They will ensure that the products that are being released in the market are safe and of high quality. And this is where the regulation becomes very important, right from clinical trials to the manufacturing, to the import, to the importation, to the distribution. This is very critical. Again, we want to look at the practitioners. What quality of practitioners do we have in the market? Because we need to get qualified practitioners who are able to get to make rational use of drugs and give the proper advice to the patient. And they also need to provide an enabling environment for compliance and reporting. Sometimes this one can be very challenging. The guidelines are there, but it is very difficult for the stakeholders to comply. So creating an enabling environment becomes very, very important. They need to facilitate access to data so that data can be used to ensure continuous improvement of the products. And definitely they need to enforce the regulations because most of the times you will find that people will not just comply with the regulations willingly. They will need some push to ensure that the regulations are adhered to. The next most important stakeholder is the patient. And basically what we are saying here is that the patient needs to be more proactive and more involved in their treatments by ensuring that they provide the accurate information, they know their medication, and when they go to see the practitioners, they will ask the right questions. They will raise safety concerns with the healthcare providers, and they should always be encouraged to report adverse events. What's the practice we have seen here, and I think it's all over, is that when a patient does not get well from a product, they just keep it aside and they decide, oh, I'm not feeling better. Maybe this product is not strong enough. They talk about strong enough, so they go for a stronger medication. Then what does this mean? We are not able to capture products that are either of low quality or they are counterfeit or they are not efficacious for any other reason. So just encouraging them to report all the events becomes very, very important. The healthcare workers, the healthcare provider, of course, is interested in having positive outcomes from the treatment they give to their patients. However, they need to encourage the patients that if you observe any event, we need to report. what we have realized here in East Africa, especially in the public hospitals, the doctors and the healthcare workers are so overwhelmed that we have the focus on the patient and the treatment, and we don't go that extra mile to advise the patient that, yes, this is what I've given you, but in case you notice anything, we need to report. We need to encourage rational use of medication and think of the NDR as one of the causes of disease. Statistics have shown that, especially in admissions, almost 5 to 10% of all admissions are as a result of an adverse drug reaction. But most of the times we find there is misdiagnosis of that. So for the healthcare workers to think that an ADR could be one of the causes of the diseases or the patient complaints would become very, very important in trying to identify the adverse drug reactions very, very early. And of course, they need to report all the events that their patients report to them, to the owner of the product or to the health authority. And the MAH, or whom the person we call the investor, this becomes very key. This becomes very, very key because we know that in business, we have very different competing interests. And what we need to look at here, we need to ensure that the investor allocates adequate resources for the pharmacovigilance activities, the same kind of prioritization they give to business processes like sales planning, strategic thinking, budgeting. This is the kind of attention that we need to see them giving to pharmacovigilance. Because if the public is safe, if the patient is safe, then they will be in business. They need to provide adequate personnel and the tools and the budgets for the PV activities. And my experience here is that this is usually not the case. You will rarely find a PV pharmacist without another combined title, like quality assurance, quality control, sales manager, business development manager, HR, all those roles are combined into one. So what does this mean? It means, in such a scenario, it means that the pharmacovigilance activities, most of the times, is given the last priority, as it is not looked at as a core business function. So what we are saying here is that the pharmacovigilance activities needs to be looked at as a core business activity like any other very important activity. And I know most people in the sales, the most important part they look at are the sales targets and the quarter targets, but this becomes very important as well. So what we are saying is we need to prioritize pharmacovigilance, and we need to make sure that the PV is everybody's business, and everybody in the company needs to understand that by entrenching the PV into company policy and definitely doing a lot of capacity building so everybody appreciates the importance of PV in the company. However, with all that, we have several successes, especially in the East African, in that in all the states right now, we have the pharmacovigilance guidelines, laws that we have laws that support pharmacovigilance guidelines, which means it's entrenched in law and so it can be enforced. The harmonized guidelines become very easy because it makes it easy to comply, especially for companies that are operating in multiple countries. Then you don't have to think, Uganda, we are going to report within 15 days, Tanzania is 20 days, and in Kenya is 3 days. Once we have harmonized guidelines, it becomes very, very easy to comply. And of course, the requirement of the local QPPV is very important. It's a way of ensuring that especially the MAHs comply with the guidelines. Another success is that we have some of the countries we have access to the global PV database like Apsara Monitoring Center, FinchiFlow, and we are able to draw from that database to just ensure that the products are safe. Challenges in East Africa, as I have indicated before, we have limited.
Jerika, can you hear me?
Yes.
Please, can you wrap up very quickly? Because
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Limited resources and funding in terms of HR and communities, and the reporting, the requirement of the QPPV, local QPPV in every country will increase cost of compliance. And of course, we have limited capacity to utilize and report information. We have recommendations very quickly. We need the political goodwill to get adequate funding for the health authorities for these activities. We need to build capacity, encourage shared resources. The harmonization is really a plus for our region. Regular mass sensitization to ensure people report, and the MAH needs to really support the PV activities. And in conclusion, PV ensures patient and public safety. It is a game sport with different players whose efforts should be synergistic. We have legal frameworks to support PV. Otherwise, implementation and enforcement remains a challenge. Public participation is paramount, and PV needs to be given adequate resources at all levels, and we need to maximize on the resources available to accelerate compliance. We need to think very seriously about the vigilance of cosmetics, pesticides, herbicides, and all these products needs to be looked into. To wrap up, at JFlex, we will look at all your compliance requirements, pre-market, on-market, and post-market in terms of regulatory, pharmacovigilance, quality, and clinical trials. And that in case you need to interact with us more, that is our contact, or that is where you will find us. And lastly, there is a book that is coming, Pharmaceutical Regulatory Handbook, a definitive handbook for the registration for the regulatory affairs practitioners. From around August, that book will be there. Thank you very much for listening, and let's interact more maybe during the question and answer sessions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jerusha. I think we've resolved the glitch that couldn't allow the moderator to take charge, but because she didn't listen to most of the presentation by Dr. Kamau, I'll just quickly run through this and hand over to her after this. We have two questions, and I don't know if Dr. Kamau can read it. Can you see it on your screen?
Let me see.
If you click on the question and answer, can you see it?
Let me just say question and answer. Okay, yes.
Okay.
I can
So
see
the first question is from Osaretin Jayeola, and she says, I would like to know why some countries are asking for each principal of a distributor to have their own QPPV. QPPV means qualified person for pharmacovigilance, and separate PSMF from the same distributor. Please explain how this will work, as most areas will be the same in PSMF. Why can't a single PSMF serve all principals with the same LTR? I hope that is clear.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Osaretin. So this is really a very valid question, because as I talked about optimizing on the resources that we have and the need to harmonize guidelines. And those two are to answer this question, because for sure it does not really add value to have a QPPV in every country or for every distributor. So what we need is to really lobby. If you have like a pharmacovigilance organization in your country, you could lobby for change of guidelines so that it's favorable and it makes it easy for the MAHs to comply. We are looking at how do we make it easy for the stakeholders to comply, and of course minimize the compliance cost. That will ensure that more and more people comply. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second question is from Chukunanso Ude. I think that's a straightforward one. I'll just answer it. Hello, I joined a bit late. please, what is the full meaning of MAH? MAH is Marketing Authorization Holder. That is the entity, usually the company, that holds the license for the product in any country. Marketing Authorization Holder. So thank you very much, Jerusha. We are beseeching you to please hold on till the end of the webinar, because more questions that you may be in a position to address might come in. So at this point, I want to hand over to Pharmacist Osakwe to Jerusha, you can stop sharing your screen, okay? Just click on stop sharing screen. Okay, very good. Okay. Yeah, I'm handing over to you, Mrs. Osakwe.
Okay.
No, the tag is saying Mrs. Brown, but it's okay.
Well, it's still having the wrong tags. I don't know how that happened, but all the same, we know who we are. I'm happy to be back in. I was away a while ago, and I can tell you it wasn't so funny. And that was why Dr. Jerusha was able to take up the 30-minute slot. You know, that 30 minutes is supposed to be for both the presentation and the questions and answers. Now we'll quickly go to Mary Banwo Ige. And Mary is slated to talk to us about the experiences in Nigeria, pharmacovigilance in Nigeria, as a Roche representative, and that is a market authorization holder in Nigeria. We hope that her own presentation will be wrapped up in fewer minutes so that people can equally ask questions. And those that couldn't get their questions in during Dr. Jerusha's presentation should be able to also do that. So Mary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Do you hear me clearly?
Very clearly.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So do I go ahead and share my screen, or it will be shared from the back end?
Please go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Will do. Kindly confirm when you do see my screen, please.
We can see your screen.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So again, good afternoon, everyone. All protocols duly observed. My name is Mary Banwo Ige. I am a pharmacist by profession, and I'm privileged to be part of a team that is exceptionally passionate about patient safety under the umbrella of pharmacovigilance. So there would be, today, in the next, say, 15 minutes, I would be sharing my experience with the local practice, that is the Nigerian experience around pharmacovigilance. Thank you. There will be time for questions and answers, clarifications as well. And please, should you want to give an input, kindly make good use of the chat box. Thank you very much. So we dive right into it. Pharmacovigilance. So, it's a word that we have heard severally, but having to say it over and over again cannot be overemphasized. So it's coined from two words, partly from Greek and then Latin. As shown on the screen, the pharmacon refers to drug and medicinal substances, while the vigilia refers to keep watch. So in other words, I would say being alert with medications that we use. So pharmacovigilance, clearly, as we know, we have read at different times, is a science, and it entails activities around adverse events or effects. And these activities are the detecting, assessing, understanding, and preventing the adverse events. What is adverse event in itself? So as a recap for us all, an adverse event is, we can say an adverse event is a response that a patient presents with post the usage or post administration of a medicinal substance. And this response may or may not have a direct relationship, like a causal relationship with the use of the drug. That is where we can split that into ADRs and adverse events. So the ADRs clearly, adverse drug reactions, ADRs are adverse drug reactions. Those ones would have a direct relationship with the use of the medication. So ADRs are adverse events, but not all adverse events are ADRs. As per the definition, the treatment may not necessarily have a causal relationship with the use of the drug. Adverse event, what do we do with this locally? So in local practice, to report an adverse event, there are minimum details that are required. And these details, simply put, there is a code for it. We refer to them as PrEP. So details around the patient, the reporter, the event, and the product. Clearly, one detail that is not required of the patient is the patient's full names. As we all know, for ethical reasons, the patient's full names are not required. So in reporting an adverse event, we would usually just capture the initials of the patient, or if there is a hospital identification number, that will be used to identify the patient. Also, the reporter details are required. The contact details of the reporter as well. This most of the time is to help us, or rather enable us perform follow-ups of the reports that have been received. The event itself should be communicated as received. And then the product, we would usually say the product is a suspect product. Going back to the definition of adverse event, where the treatment may not necessarily have a causal relationship with the event that has been presented. So we refer to the product as suspect. So it's important to capture details of the suspected product, as well as the concomitant that the patient may be on. What do we do with these reports when we receive them locally? So, from organizations to organizations, should we receive a report, there is a drug safety unit. That is the pharmacovigilance unit that sits within that organization. In other words, within that MAH, Marketing Authorization Holder. So the report goes to the local drug safety, and therefrom the report is sent to the back-end safety team. Who are the back-end safety team? They are some safety experts that specialize in reviewing and analyzing the reports, just to ensure that the benefits do outweigh the risk. And at the very end of it, the reports certainly are sent to the regulatory authority. In our case, it is NAFDAC. The reports are sent to NAFDAC from there actions are taken, where actions are required to be taken, depending on what comes out of it. So this is what happens when an adverse event is reported, and how we manage it locally. In addition to adverse event reporting, there are a whole number of activities that go on within the pharmacovigilance space. Adverse event reporting is one big one of them. Of course, from the screen, we see a number of them. I would touch on about maybe 5 of them. I would touch on the PVBCP, I would touch on the PSMF, I would touch on the PSURs, as well as risk minimization activities, which also falls under risk management plan. So I will start with the PVBCP. So PVBCP simply means Pharmacovigilance Business Continuity Plan. So, the COVID experience is a very good example. So just like any other business continuity plan, it is important that we have this in place. And the reason is to enable us manage whatever dysfunction that could come up in the system. So I use the COVID, the pandemic as an example. So no one planned for COVID, no one knew it was going to be coming, and then COVID happened. A lot of the processes that we do within the pharmacovigilance space locally had to change. Yeah, and with the changing, stakeholders are involved. All the stakeholders, they need to be notified, that, okay, it's not business as usual. Something something came up, something happened, and for that reason, we have 1, 2, 3 in place to manage, the incidents, and then we move on from there. So that is one of the activities that is performed within the pharmacovigilance space. Another is the PSMF. PSMF is Pharmacovigilance System Master File. It is simply a document, a very simple and very detailed document. And this document, is usually maintained, over at intervals, is maintained to ensure that it is up to date. And it's a document that tells any inspector or anybody that requires PV information of a particular MAH, it gives the full details of what is your PV system like. You have the whole details in the PSMF. So that's the whole essence of the PSMF. And then I move on to risk minimization activities. So, just like the name follows through, risk minimization activities, these are activities that are usually conducted to minimize risk, simply put. I'll give an example. So where a particular pharma organization has one same product in 2 dosage forms, it is important that for such products, then there is a need to perform risk minimization activities. And the need follows to ensure, the whole and sole aim of this is patient safety, to ensure that, okay, so if one dosage form is subcutaneous and the other dosage form is intravenous, as an example, we want to ensure and make sure that the healthcare practitioners out there, it's clear to them. We need to, pass on that information to them so that they have it right at their hands and can guide their patients accordingly. So that is the whole essence of risk minimization activities. And to conduct risk minimization activities, there must be approval from NAFDAC as our regulatory authorities. So that is just to paint a bit more picture around risk minimization activities. And then the last I'll touch on this slide would be PSUR or PBRA. So simply put, PSUR is Periodic Safety Update Report, or you can use the PBRA as well, which is Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report. So these are reports per product. They are reports per product that they are generated at intervals from the data lock point, and they are shared with the regulatory authorities. Because as an organization, we need and must ensure that the regulatory authority are kept in the know of each published report of such. So all of these activities and more are activities that go on in the space of pharmacovigilance locally. And all of these activities are also guided they are also guided by the local legislature from NAFDAC. What are the common features of the PV function? So within the PV function, it has a lot to do with compliance. Compliance. It cannot be overemphasized. Why compliance? Compliance because it has to do with patient safety. We are out there to protect the patient, which is one of the key reasons, most important reasons why pharmacovigilance. It has to do with patient safety. We're talking about patient safety, we talk about the patient as well as public health. Another key reason is that it does provide the physicians, that is the prescribers, with it provides them with some sort of prescribing pattern, such that I'll give an example to this, or a scenario, so to say. So where there is a product out there in the market, of course, each product comes with its product information, the leaflet you see within the product. There might, of course, the side effects are also stated. Where there is a side effect that is not stated within that product insert, and years after a duration of time, something is found out through adverse event reporting, that statement or whatever that is, the event or effect, is added on, to the product insert in an updated form. So where that happens, or before that update happens, there is need for the healthcare practitioners to know. So should they see patients in such category, they look out for it and ensure that that what drug they're prescribing for the patient is guided accordingly. So all of this has to do with compliance. And also a very important point is it's a mandatory, as a marketing authorization holder, that we comply to regulatory authority standards. And for us in Nigeria, there is a clear guideline guiding and leading us on the practice of pharmacovigilance. So that is on compliance. Also, within the pharmacovigilance space, it has a lot to do with process, and then the use of systems. And for this reason, imagine where one person comes into the organization, another person leaves. So like most other organization and settings, there are procedural documents to guide on the processes, which is what we have in the SOPs. Here, we do see a lady, she looks odd in the setting. So practicing in the pharmacovigilance space is odd. And it's odd because it has a whole lot to do with compliance. Not that compliance is odd. Compliance is a great thing. However, there's you're like in a world of your own, right? You just, most of the time is looked at like, okay, so I'll give a scenario. You have a sales team, you have a marketing team, and that's their work, that's their target. They just want to hit the business, get the sales. However, with the third party they're going to be working with, there is need to have clear contracts in place. And within those such contracts, it is of paramount importance that there is a safety language guiding the business, or guiding the business that they will be having with the third party. And for that reason, the pharmacovigilance responsible needs to be in the know of such. So with pharmacovigilance, most of the time, it looks like you're trying to, manage, take deep details into things. Meanwhile, the sales or marketing team, they just want to move ahead and run with it. But it's important that we all work together as a team and then move on from there, so that where the pharmacovigilance issues pop up, they are well captured within the contract and then in the reality of the business conduct. Also, pharmacovigilance has a lot to do with timelines. Talking about timelines, clearly as part of adverse event reporting, we do have serious adverse events and non-serious adverse events. And as an example to that, for our local legislation states that we report serious adverse events within 15 days from the day it was first captured. And for the non-serious, within 90 days from the day it was first captured. So what is our reality and our challenge? Within the local practice, under reporting, it's a clear challenge. I believe this is not peculiar to only Nigeria. There is a growing awareness. The awareness is not there, but it's growing. And we can only, just keep working together as, collaborate with all the relevant stakeholders to ensure that we grow that awareness. Also, the implementation of the current PV guideline. So as at 2013, there was a guideline on PV, and the guideline was of 13 pages. Today, from 2016, this guideline was published in 2016, we now have a guideline of about 180 pages. That's a huge difference. It's a beautiful thing to have a document guiding one. However, at some point, at different points, there are some struggles for clarification on some of the stipulated regulations. So this is also, our reality. How about when it comes to business impact? So there is a low knowledge of PV on business impact. I used an example around sales and marketing before. a lot of times, and for most organizations, a lot of focus is given to the sales and marketing team. However, not as much focus is given to the pharmacovigilance function. And the reason, I don't know, everyone has their different reasons, but it has come, it is getting clearer and clearer that PV has good impact. It has a great impact on the business. And it stands out as a competitive advantage. It stands out a competitive advantage to the business. Also, locally, it is part of our requirement that there is a qualified person for pharmacovigilance. Now, this person has to manage the PV system, right? At the same time, in managing the PV system, that takes up a lot of time. And taking up a lot of time leaves less time for strategic partnership, you know, with other farmers, with the regulatory authority, and more. So these are part of the reality we face locally. Amidst this reality, and then with all the processes we have to manage within the PV system, of course, we have NAFDAC guiding us. There is a clear pharmacovigilance guideline, as earlier mentioned, which is the good pharmacovigilance practice guidelines. There are three directorates of the 14 directorates that NAFDAC has that the PV function works with, but majorly we work with the PV PMS directorate, which is the pharmacovigilance and post-marketing surveillance directorate. Also, within the PV function, we work with different stakeholders. And these stakeholders, of course, it cuts across internal and external stakeholders within the organization and outside, as seen on the screen. I would touch on other details through which we work with these stakeholders.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Please, you need to wrap up in the next 4 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am.
So that the next presenter would come on. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the HCPs, what do we do with them? We create awareness with them, awareness on adverse event reporting. A number of times, particularly with, you know, so I use the oncology setting, you know, is expected that most oncology products and most oncology drugs, they tend to have side effects of nausea and vomiting. So even sometimes HCPs are not clear that they need to report that because it's a known side effect. So even when it's a known side effect, it's important that these are reported. So we create awareness amongst the HCPs. We do that through field visits. We do that through CMEs and trainings as well. We also do follow-ups with healthcare practitioners to ensure that there's a follow-up to the cases that were initially reported. With NAFDAC specifically is the PVPMS unit that we do a lot of interaction. NAFDAC, they stand as a backbone on safety-related issues, you know, provide clarifications where we are not clear about something, and therefrom we are able to move ahead. We also make submissions of documents to NAFDAC, periodic safety updates reports, and then the CIOMS report. The CIOMS report is the report of adverse events from time to time that goes to NAFDAC, and also risk management plan, which is submitted to NAFDAC upon their request. Also, we request approval from NAFDAC for different activities, like the risk minimization earlier explained. Approval to disseminate such information to healthcare practitioners, and then collaboration on the journey of patient safety as well. Now with the service providers, what do we do? These are usually the third parties. The third parties, because they are not in the system. We need to give clarity as to what is required, where we are going to be engaging them on, you know, projects that will entail some sort of pharmacovigilance. Then that needs to be clear in the contracts. We train them on adverse event reporting, and there's usually a reconciliation, you know, done to ensure that no adverse events have been missed in the course of the program. Also with patients are able to report directly through the public channels that we have, and with the internal team, collaboration cuts across functions, all functions. With the medical, it could be, resolving medical queries that have associated adverse events. With the commercial, it's been earlier explained where they engage a third party to, go on board a program. With the regulatory team as well, we do have interactions where we need to generate their healthcare practitioner letters. And the procurement team, we engage the procurement team on contract management as well as the access team. So these are the different stakeholders with which we work locally to improve that space of pharmacovigilance and to ensure that there is complete oversight of pharmacovigilance activities across the different activities that happens. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. You have just barely made it. I think that because the time is far gone, and to allow Jean-Christophe Delumieux to make his own presentation, we withhold the question and answer session until the end, so that he will make his presentation and we'll the questions. We have about 3 questions for you, which we'll take at the end. So on this note, I would like to call on Jean-Christophe Delumieux to make his presentation on strengthening on activities critical for the effectiveness of PV systems in sub-Saharan Africa. The earlier presentation was on East Africa, then Nigeria being West Africa. Now we look at the whole gamut of sub-Saharan Africa. And as to be expected, we're going to have a lot more elaborate presentations, and some of the presentations are such that will elicit a lot of questions. So we'll take all the questions at the end of the presentations. Thank you.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be given the opportunity to present in what I understand is a newly created group. And I'll present a topic which is becoming one of my priorities for reasons which I will explain here. But before starting, I wish to disclose that I am a full-time Bayer employee for nearly 20 years, actually. I'm not receiving financial compensation for my involvement in ISOP, the International Society of Pharmacovigilance, nor EFPA, the European Federation of Pharma Industries and Association. And I want to emphasize that the views I will be expressing today are mine, not necessarily reflecting those of Bayer, my employer, nor the views of organization I am collaborating with. However, I'm not the only one to have those ideas which I will share today. For decades, the WHO focused efforts on access to medicine, whereas pharmacovigilance was seen as of a lesser priority. However, it became increasingly evident that strengthening healthcare systems was a prerequisite for making available new drugs and vaccine necessary to tackle serious public health threats in developing countries, such as the emergence or extension of communicable diseases. So on the 15th of May 2014, the World Health Assembly issued a resolution urging, and urging was the term used, urging the governments of the WHO member countries to strengthen their regulatory system for medicinal products. Subsequently, the WHO developed a so-called global benchmark tool designed to evaluate the maturity of the healthcare system of individual countries, and this global benchmark tool included a module for PV system assessment. That's module 3, so-called vigilance. In 2018, the WHO Global Benchmark Tool was used to make a kind of baseline assessment which showed, unfortunately, that in half of the countries, the maturity of the healthcare system was lagging at the lowest level, maturity 1. Whereas it's considered that a maturity 3 at least is necessary to ensure the safe use of products in a country. To assess this issue, the health authorities around the world are actively strengthening PV regulations, and this is particularly true in sub-Saharan Africa, which is very active in strengthening and issuing new upgraded regulations. But whereas strengthening PV requirements is essentially a good thing, the problem is that those requirements may deviate from globally agreeable standards, and this results in burden for both license holders and health authority, which burdens do not really add value to the safety of patients. In 2020, at least 3 publications reported the persistence of weaknesses affecting PV system in East African countries. Especially the article by Barry and collaborators reporting an in-depth assessment of the healthcare system performed in the context of the Preforma project supported by the European Union. The 2 other articles emphasize the need for harmonizing safety regulations as well as the necessity to substantially improve the volume of individual case safety reports from sub-Saharan African countries. The study by Barry and collaborators evaluated the PV systems in Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania, and 3 of them, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania, are part of the East African community. In those countries, the WHO benchmark tool was used to assess the legal and statutory documents relative to the organization of the PV system. It did not so much assess the tool for the time being is not so much to evaluate the effectiveness. It's more the status of the regulation, but I hope I'm not sharing a secret, but the benchmark tool is in the process of being revised to be more capable of assessing the effectiveness. The most problematic deficiency identified by those authors was the poor reporting rate of suspected adverse drug reaction, ranging from less than 1 to 35 cases per million population reported annually. Combined with other deficiencies, the authors concluded that as of 2018, none of those countries had really the capacity to monitor how safely medicine are used in comparison to their increased accessibility to patients, which substantially improved in the past decade. On this slide, the left cartridge, which is as of 2018, the Preforma paper, shows those 4 countries and shows the reporting rate of cases as reporting in VGBase, the WHO database. And I'd like to emphasize that because the term VGBase, VGLISE, or maybe VGFlow were cited. I want to clarify that VGFlow is a system that the UMC makes available to country to support their national PV database. And most African countries are using VGFlow, and this is a very good idea. VGFlow is according to the most recent E2B-R3 standard for individual case safety report. Whereas VGBase is the WHO database, which is also handled by the Uppsala Monitoring Center, which collect cases from countries using VGFlow, but from countries using other systems around the world. whereas VG Lies is a new and very advanced tool which is available to all countries members of the WHO Programme for International Drug Monitoring, which gives each and every national regulatory authority the possibility to make searches at the country level, regional level, compared to the global level. It's a fantastic tool that health authorities have available. And VG Lies is designed to make searches, signal detection searches into VG Base, the WHO database. I hope this will help to clarify this terminology. So, back to the slides. So we have seen on the left cartridge, and I have put on the right cartridge an extract from a paper by Hilda Ampadu that some of you may know from 2015, which shows the reporting figures, the incidence in 32 African countries. And what we see as of 2015, so this might have improved since that, but we see that among the 32 countries, the annual ICSR reporting rate per million exceeds 100 only in Cabo Verde, Namibia, and Eritrea. It ranges between 10 and 14 in only 7 countries. And it's between 1 and 10 in 15 countries, and it's less than 1 per million in the 7 remaining countries among the 32. So this is very low overall, and as a benchmark, about 3,000 ICSR per million are reported annually in the United States. So there is really big efforts to make in Africa, and the problem is that the collection of adverse drug reaction is the fuel of all subsequent pharmacovigilance activity. If you do not collect adverse events in your PV system, you are not in a position to check, to follow, to monitor to what extent the drugs are used safely in your PV system. And it's not reviewing PBRER, which include mainly foreign data, which will help knowing what's happening in your country. So I really wanted to insist on that. Now the pre-forma assessment reported also has gaps when the PV regulations did not require to submit periodic safety update report. However, it should be remarked that some advanced national regulatory authority, which are cautious about resources, rely upon more resource health authority as for PSUR review and request PSUR only for specific products. So it's perfect to ask for PBRER to be submitted, provided that the health authority has the capability to review them. Otherwise, there is no advantage. And again, some very advanced authority do not systematically ask for them and may be member of ICH. So in this context, what are those requirements increasingly found in PV regulation which appear problematic, especially for license holders, but not only? A first example is license holder requiring to submit PSURs more frequently than the EMA is requesting. Despite that, African Health Authority lack resources to review them. And as a consequence, most of those PSURs end up unreviewed on a shelf. A second example is license holder required to perform a post-approval safety study each time a signal is identified. I have found that in a regulation. Whereas a labeling change and a healthcare professional communication can minimize timely those newly identified risks. So it would only lose time to perform post-approval study for everything. A third example is license holder required to submit foreign ICSR to health authorities, whereas they are not equipped with a suitable IT system to host and analyze those cases. So then those huge listings may not actually be reviewed. Yeah. So I understand from what countries are coming from. They collect very few adverse events from their own country, so they believe by getting adverse events from the rest of the world would help them to see what's happening. But a listing of case is not the right tool to analyze what's happening in the rest of the world. The right tool is to use Vigilize. That's a much more effective use of the resources. So, unfortunately, such requirement, which result in a substantial additional burden for both license holders and health authority, do not address the problem of the very low ICSR reporting rate. Continuing with problematic requirement, there are license holders who may require to submit ICSR within a time frame shorter than the timeline stipulated in international guideline. Such requirement deviating from international standard finally result in a premature submission of non-evaluated cases, which adds burden to both license holder and health authorities. So it's better to follow the regular timelines that the global system of the license holder are designed for and make one submission once the case is documented. Problematic also, and this was mentioned already, not necessarily as a problem, that license holders are increasingly expected to locate a qualified person in pharmacovigilance QPPV in each African country, whereas the EU GVP, which created this role, is one for the entire European Union. So actually, whereas there is in the EU one QPPV for a company for 500 million people, then and 27 countries, then we have African regulation asking for a QPPV in each and every country. So the problem is that by not allowing a QPPV to cover multiple African countries, license holder force the company to appoint in the role someone who is not part of the company. Whereas what's advisable is that the health authority would have the most direct access to the most qualified person on the product in the global organization. Have a one-lay just one step, but this is possible if the QPPV is covering a region like it is in the European Union. Of course, if the QPPV is regional, companies are keen to have a local contact person, but QPPV is a highly qualified role, and it's often not possible to have such a person in each and every country in Africa. So that's really a problem. So, I would like now to focus on what's maybe the main issue and a growing one. Contrasting, it's this PSUR submission issue. Contrasting with the EMA, which apply a risk proportionate schedule, African regulations increasingly request license holder to submit PSUR every 6 months for the first 2 years since the launch date in the country, then annually for 5 years, then every 3 years, irrespective of the risk associated to the product. So, this lack of synchronization with the international PSUR issuance schedule, combined with the lack of risk proportionality, results into the need to generate, especially for African countries, a substantial amount of PSUR in addition to those which have to be generated for international submission. This is very, very burdensome. But this generate a considerable additional workload for not only for the license holder but also for the health authority, who may be overwhelmed by the amount of PSUR to be reviewed. And I'd like to give you some figure to let you understand. If applying the same requirement as Uganda and Kenya, the EMA would need to review about 30 PSUR weekly for a portfolio of about 3,000 products. So even with a lesser amount of medicine listed, African Health Authority missed the resources for reviewing so many documents, while reviewing a single PSUR according to the Health Canada standards requires about 7 to 72 hours on average. So alternatively, African Health Authority may focus their resources on monitoring the safety of the medicine developed especially for Africa. And this is a recommendation from the WHO. Yeah, while relying upon the EMA for medicines used in the EU, requesting PSURs according to the so-called European the URD list, European drug list, taking advantage from PSUR assessment report produced by the EMA for each of those PSUR submitted to the EMA. And its and reliance is something that the WHO is also very much advocating for at the moment, especially on this COVID time. Third recommendation would be to use Vigilize, as already mentioned, to search for signal on a relevant regional data pool, especially when the data pool from the very country is small. So enlarging to surrounding countries with a similar PV system, and using some some specific methods developed by the Uppsala Monitoring Center. One should also remark that reviewing global PSUR more frequently than considered necessary by the EMA does not help monitoring the safe use of medicine in African healthcare system, again for the simple reason that the number of cases collected from Africa is very low. So the recommendations I just mentioned are consistent with those stated in a paper called Effective Pharmacovigilance System Development, EFPA IPVG Consensus Recommendation, which was published in 2021 in January in Drug Safety, the Journal of the International Society of Pharmacovigilance. And I happen to be one of the co-authors of this paper. So, proposal for improving PV system effectiveness. Finally, while we are advocating for reconsidering requirements deviating from international standards, we would like to propose principles and methods which we believe can improve the effectiveness of PV system. And this includes to apply the principle of risk proportionality to prioritize PV activities, to apply good reliance and work sharing practice as recommended by the WHO, and most important, to improve the reporting of suspected adverse drug reaction by undertaking a cultural change to promote blame-free reporting behaviors, and the regulatory authorities have a very key role to play and the industry should support. Implementing the MedSafety app for collecting cases directly from healthcare professionals and users, and the case collected with the MedSafety app can be directly loaded into the VigiFlow container of the countries using VigiFlow. Assign staff in medical institutions in charge of screening for cases. That's something that India has done very successfully. And I think Tanzania is following this way. Implementing post-approval vigilance program following the launch of novel products. So what's this program? It's not something that would be considered as an additional pharmacovigilance or an additional risk minimization according to the EU standards, but it's more easily implementable. It's derived from the concept of early post-marketing vigilance in Japan, which was pretty successful. And ISOP has worked out this methodology in a special interest group, and there was even a pilot in Indonesia which was successful. So that would be a way to relatively easily collect in a stimulated manner adverse events, while at the same time the medical representative of the company would enforce the proper use of the product by educating doctors, the prescribers. So finally, yeah, so, oh, sorry, there is a just miss. Yeah. So, to address the issue explained in my presentation, I would like to kind of instigate an initiative such as a collaboration with the Africa Regulatory Network, which you've certainly heard about. Initiative which would involve the relevant African and global stakeholders into a series of online workshops to further reflect on those issues and refine solutions. And subsequently, it would be great if the SCOMRA conference would be able to host communicating on the outcome of those collaborative workshops. Thank you very much for your attention, and your questions are most welcome.
Thank you so much, Jean Christophe. I think you have said so much in so short a time. That gives us room for questions and answers. Already we have about 13 questions, but before then, I'd like to say that many of these suggestions have been on the board for a very long time. And the issue is how effective is the collaboration between the regulatory authorities and the marketing authorization holders in terms of coming together, not having preconceived notions about whether this group is requiring so much, and coming together to say, how do we collaborate to work together for the benefits of the patients, who are the people that every person is working for. You know, there's this saying that perception is more real than reality. When a marketing authorization holder feels that the regulatory authorities are actually overburdening them, it becomes very difficult to work together. And when the regulatory authorities feel that the marketing authorization holders are actually trying to play smart, so to speak, by not doing what they're supposed to do, because these are African people. They're not as particular as they would be in Europe or in the America, for instance. It becomes a problem. But when the groups come together and work together, then you see that the results will be beneficial to all. I actually appreciate your comments about all these reports that are being requested. And at the end of the day, there's not much evaluation of the reports. They just become reports on the shelves. These are areas that need to be looked into so that whatever report is requested is put to maximum use for the benefits of all. Thank you. I think we need to look at the questions, and I believe that okay,
So they are in the Q&A.
yes.
Mrs. Otakwe, I think you are able to read the question sent you. Can you
Okay.
click on
Yes,
the
K-
Q&A?
yes, I
Yeah.
am.
Okay,
And
so please
some,
go ahead. Handle it.
So, which could you, chairperson, because I understand that we are over time, could you select the questions which you would like me to answer? I think that would be that may be easier.
yes, but we have not answered all the questions are put together.
Yeah,
Both the questions from your presentation and the questions from
the previous
Mrs.
presentation as
Ige.
well. Yeah.
Yes,
So I
they're
think it would
together.
be more
But we'll,
productive if, as chairperson, you select the question to be answered.
okay, we will select 3 questions from the previous presentation
Yeah.
and 3 questions from your own.
Yeah.
That, okay? So there's a question from,
Maybe I stop sharing so you can select. I stop sharing, so then you can maybe share the
okay,
Q&A on your side, and then we'll see on what question you're focusing. I think that's probably the most efficient way to proceed.
okay. I want to share this.
Or can I share my screen instead?
Okay, can you see it now? Can you see
Okay,
the
yes.
questions?
Yes,
Can
we
you see
can.
it? Okay. So the first question that would want Pharmacist Ige to address is from Chukwu Nonsoude, where it says, using PREP, what if the patient is also the reporter and she is reporting directly to the database?
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am.
But,
Do you still hear me clearly?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I just responded to that question. So where the patient is also the reporter, it's important to maintain the patient details. It's possible to go ahead and report such a case. It's important to maintain initials as the patient details, and then the full names as the reporter. I mean, the issue of the name being unblinded is, in my thoughts, it's an assumption. It's an assumption.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next one is from Uyi, and he's asking, in Nigeria, PV reporting contact is not found on product packaging. What is the position of regulation regarding this? I'm not sure that the question is for you. Also, what is the position of regulation in Kenya? So if you have comments there, and Dr. Jerusha can also make a comment.
Thank you very much.
Is there a need to have the contact of the person in the packaging? The person that is being reported to? Because actually the reports can go to the regulatory authority, or it can go to the marketing authorization holder. It does not have to be a particular person. If they have a contact, it would be like email or number, a phone number that they could call to report. But you can make further comments if you want.
The comments are all captured, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Then finally, for your own Saritin Jayola is a question to Mary. Please confirm for me that E2B submission is now. Can you see the question?
Please
confirm to me that E2B submission is now applicable in Nigeria as per new guideline, and kindly help guide how to comply with these new requirements in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Sorry, I would E2B. I do know it's one of the platforms through which we submit adverse event report. What I'm not clear on is of the new guideline. I mean, the most recent guideline I know of is 2016 guideline, which is still on.
Yes.
Osarity, can you confirm you have another guideline outside the 2016 guideline? Please.
She's not able to talk anyway, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. She can maybe leave a chat message. But
yes,
anyway, within the 2016 guideline is SIOMS. I mean, report sent to NAFDAC are sent in SIOMS form, not E2B.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if I may, I can confirm that Nigeria has a VGFlow license, and that VGFlow is all E2BR3. So technically speaking, individual case safety reports may be submitted electronically as XML file in E2BR2 or E2BR3 format, but that's the technical aspect.
Okay. Now for Jean-Christophe. The question is, you mentioned that for global products, that Africa should rely on reporting from other parts of the EU and other parts of the globe. In doing this, would we not miss adverse events from Africa?
Yeah, so what I said is that, and this is a recommendation from the WHO as well, African countries, and this is true for not only Africa, should focus their resource in priority to the medicines which have been developed especially for Africa, because this is something that the EMA will not do. Yeah, that's the most important. Then, as for the use of products in African countries which are also used in the EU, if there would be a substantial amount of individual case safety report reported by African countries, there would be an added value at reviewing the periodic benefits, the PBRER, the PSURs. But because the amount of cases is so low in African country, there is not much related to Africa to review. So it's a better use of resources to rely upon the assessment report of reports which include almost exclusively data from out of Africa. Now, what in a context where hopefully the number of cases from Africa will progressively increase and efforts should be focused on that, then it's more productive rather than re-reviewing a PBRER already reviewed by the EMA containing almost exclusively non-African data. It's more productive to use VG-LISE, searching VG base, focusing on the cases, on the few cases reported from the African country and the surrounding countries. See what I mean? Because that's something that would add value, because this is a focus that the EMA would not have focused on. You see what I mean? So don't misinterpret what I said. It's not, it's rely upon the EMA for the review of global data. But what comes from Africa, that's very much the business of African NRA. So the right tool for it is to use VG-LISE and to apply the methodology published in March 2020 by the Uppsala Monitoring Center to search for signal in small data pools. And this is not in the global PSUR. So it's a duplication of EMA's work to review those global PBRER compared to focusing on VG-LISE on the data pool of African cases. Yeah, and there is also a problem of amount. You know, most sub-Saharan African countries have probably 2 FTEs which they can dedicate to PBRER review. Yeah, so it limits the number of PSUR which can be reviewed. So it's more productive to this has to be, and actually this is what those African countries who are engaging into actually reviewing PBRER and who are actually a bit struggling with the amount, they actually have to prioritize the PBRER which they are reviewing, and they are prioritizing those of products which have been developed for Africa. So it doesn't make so much sense to ask license holder to generate more PBRER than the EMA is asking, whereas this PBRER cannot contain a substantial number of African cases. VG-LISE is the best tool to focus on what's really from Africa. Is that well understood?
Yes, I think so. It is. So on that note, there's a question that asked, is it possible to circulate the presentations? I think the organizers would be in the...
Oh, I would be delighted to.
All right.
Sure.
All the
no problem. Yep.
I
will generate it as a PDF. It's preferable to generate it as a PDF.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That would be okay. Then my final comments to the presenters, especially Jean-Christophe and Mary, is to try in their own capacities to ensure that you work in collaboration with regulatory authorities. I don't think that they purposely want to overburden, but maybe because they needed that collaboration in terms of strengthening their capacities in regulatory activities. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and actually, if I would like to rebound on that, this is exactly, I cannot agree more, and this is exactly what I am proposing in the last slide, is that we take advantage from the Africa Regulatory Network to set up a dialogue involving, I would say, for example, regulatory strengthening at the WHO level, and people from relevant people from national regulatory authorities, ISOP, to discuss together how to find the optimized solution. So through interpersonal networking, there are connections, but I think we need to trigger, I would say, a bit more structured initiative to work together on that. So the dialogue is absolutely key.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. That is duly noted. We work, we rely on NAFDAC a lot as a backbone, and that collaboration will be continuous. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Chukura.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I want to especially thank the panelists, and more importantly, the participants that made out time to log in. I believe this has been a very interesting topic. 1 hour 30 minutes won't be enough to hit or answer questions on pharmacovigilance. So on this note, we want to inform all participants that the Organization of Regulatory Affairs Professionals is a new organization, and you can see on the screen the link to join to become a member. All we do is we share knowledge and improve on our experiences, share experiences, improve on our knowledge of regulatory affairs. So thank you from Adeline Osakwe, our big mommy in the house. Thank you, the organizers, panelists. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the participants. And we pray that next time we call on you, you will answer us. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Please, before you dial off, a recording of this webinar will also be shared. The link to it will be shared among all participants by email. Okay. So I think that would be better than sharing the slides.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we can leave JC Domelio to go and sleep. Sorry, we denied you of your sleep time.
That's not a problem. You know, I am used to adapt. So that was very interesting. And yeah, I very much enjoy this workshop. So thank you for inviting me, and I hope that's a beginning, and that we'll have other opportunities to exchange ideas together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mary.